Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning to everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Apprentice Young Professional e-Development Talk series entitled Hybrid Teaching, Effective Strategies for Meaningful Learning Experience. So this session will last for 1.5 hours, and our guest speaker for today is Dr. Mohammad Tazli bin Azizan, who is currently the Associate Professor in Faculty of Chemical Engineering Technology, UNIMEP, University Malaysia Perlis. He is also the current Vice President of the Society of Engineering Education Malaysia, SEEM. Okay, a little bit of his information. Dr. Tazli, which is currently the Associate Professor at UNIMEP, was also a former Associate Professor at University Technology Petronas, UTP, for which he had served the institution for the past 17 years. Dr. Tazli graduated his PhD in Chemical Engineering from Imperial College London, funded by the Commonwealth Scholarship in 2014. He was also appointed as the Director for Centre for Excellence in Teaching and Learning at UTP, championing the Student-Centered Learning (SCL) pedagogy initiatives at the institution from 2014 until 2019. On top of that, he was also then appointed as one of the National Education Policy Reform Task Force members from 2018 until 2019, serving the former Education Minister. He was also seconded to Perak ICT and Multimedia GLC, Digital Perak, as the Chief Executive Officer for 9 months. Okay, so he has a very good track record, especially in teaching and learning. And that's why we are very grateful to have Dr. Tazli today to share with us on. So why does Prentice chose hybrid teaching as a topic? Because currently, as we all know, during the pandemic, all lecturers are needed and are required to conduct hybrid teaching, which combines online learning and also face-to-face learning. Okay, so for all attendees, if you would like to receive your e-certificate for your attendance today, I will share you the link, and when you fill in the registration form, you will be emailed directly and automatically with the e-certificate. Okay, without further ado, I would like to welcome Dr. Tazli on behalf of Parentis to deliver his talk for today. Welcome, Dr. Tazli.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I hope that you can hear me clearly. Thank you, Dr. Rashdan, for the warm welcome. Let me share my screen first with everyone. Okay. So basically, this is my slide. Perhaps, all right. So now it's being shared. Okay. So today, inshallah, I'll be sharing with every one of you here about hybrid teaching, effective strategies for meaningful learning experience. The title given by Prentice, and I'm glad to share with you some of the concept about hybrid teaching. So what is hybrid teaching is all about, and how do we actually could have a meaningful strategies on how do we make it effective to make sure that our students have a meaningful learning experience. So today's session for 1.5 hours, as mentioned by Dr. Rashdan, I'll be explaining the needs to reform the teaching and learning practices. So why do we need to change towards a hybrid approach somehow, and to describe various hybrid teaching and learning approaches. So these are the things that I'll be covering. So there'll be some outline of the topics for which I will discuss about the needs for us to change on the hybrid approaches in teaching and learning. What is that? on the hybrid approaches in teaching and learning, how to do that, and some kind of ideas and tips and tricks for hybrid teaching. And finally, we can have question and answer. However, I could also have question and answer from everyone. If let's say you have any question that I've tried to address from time to time. Okay. So we talk first about Industrial Revolution 4.0. Okay, when there is, I think that we have been hearing about the buzzword for the past, I think 2 to 3 years. Everybody have been listening to people talk about Industrial Revolution 4.0, when actually there is Internet of Things, there is some what do you call that, blockchain management, there is cyber security, there is cloud technology, and so called, and all those kind of things. And we've been talking about Education 4.0, like how to make sure that our students are equipped well with the recent, not only about the technology, but most important thing is about the thinking skills behind Industry 4.0. Because all this while, what happened is that when we arrange the students in the class, for example, like they are sitting, facing you, you are the one who talks, and they are the one who listen, and they're following the schedule all the time, like when is the break time, and then after that they come back to the class, and then after that they keep listening to you, and they ask when, even sometimes there are certain teachers, for example, or lecturers, do not want the students to ask questions, and when they grow up they do not wanting to ask questions because they're afraid to ask silly question or stupid question. When we are doing that, actually we are still making our students stuck at Industry 2.0. At Industry 2.0, during that time we need a lot of people who are actually on the assembly line. They're just following instruction to make sure that it achieve the right quality. Okay, but in the Industry 4.0, we need our future ready graduates. For example, future graduates who are able to equip themselves with the best critical thinking, the analytical thinking, and in a way that how can they best automate things using Internet of Things, for example, how can they best use the data to make decision, for example. So these are the skills that we need to put into our students. As such, we can see that there are a lot of there are new emerging jobs. There are also declining jobs in the future. For example, like we can see in 2022, which is by next year, there will be top 10 emerging jobs. For example, like as data analysts and scientists, machine learning specialists, general and operation managers, software and application developers, big data specialists, digital transformation specialists, and so on. And you can see that there's a lot of new job that we have never heard before. Like for example, like social media experts, for example, and even the way how the engineers are doing things in the future also be changing. For example, before this, we just have a big panel so that we can actually observe and see anything wrong by ourselves. But after this, is basically it's just automated by IoT, Internet of Things. And the most important skill that we need to have, for example, like a complex problem solving skills, decision making skills. So these are the things that we need to instill to our students since they are young, at schools, even at the universities. And you can start to see that there will be top 10 declining jobs, about 75 million jobs will be losses. For example, like the data entry clerks, accounting, assembly and factory workers, client information, business services, material recording, general and postal and services clerk, for example. So these are the jobs that will be declining. And surprisingly, you can start to see that if let's say you want to groom students into a new skill, it doesn't have to take long. For example, like if you want to teach them cloud computing and engineering skills, it needs about 4 to 5 months for the training. If let's say you want to train the people and the culture, content writing, copywriting, for example, because this is quite famous nowadays, it just take only about 1 to 2 months. While actually product development and data and AI skills, they took about like 2 to 3 months. That's a lot. I mean, that's very short actually. Okay, compared to the university that we are teaching our students about 3 years to 4 years, and then after that, you know, they need to find jobs, and suddenly they find that the jobs they're looking for is no longer there. So that's quite a bit upsetting, right? So I would like to ask you a question, okay, so that I can bring you to Mentimeter here. Um, Let me ask you a question so that everybody can answer me. If you be able to take out your mobile for now, just go to www.menti.com, okay, and then use the code 28697526. If you go to this code, can you respond back to me? What are the important skills in preparing our graduates for RR 4.0? So what are the skills that is needed? What do you think the most essential skills that we need to give to our students to make sure that our students equip well for IR 4.0? So let's say I give you 1 or 2 minutes so that you can respond to this. Okay, we have one response here, which is programming. Do we have any other response? Like 2 or 3 more response I could have? So one of you said here that we need programming skill in order to control stress level. Okay, that is also very very much important. Emotional management, pengurusan emosi. Okay, right. So let me bring back. I know there's not many of you, but it's okay. So let me bring back to the slide. So what are the important skills that we could use to prepare our graduates for RR 4.0? So this is the future required skills. These are top 10 skills that we need to nurture our students in 2025, which is the first one is on the analytical thinking and innovation. Uh, how do we nurture analytical thinking and innovation culture? How do we teach active learning and learning strategies? Learning how to learn is also an important skill that need to be learned. Complex problem solving, especially as a team, working together as a team to solve complex problem solving. Critical thinking and analysis, how they be able to make to be critical in their thinking and make some kind of analysis. Creativity, originality, and initiative. If you haven't heard right now, one of the traits for the future leaders is being creative. If you're not being creative, you cannot be a leader. Okay, so we need to also nurture creativity, originality, and initiative. Leadership and social influence. So we need to teach our students about having leadership and having influence. Okay, not only become influencer. Okay, because I know that right now we have many YouTuber, many influencer, but somehow not in the right direction. So we need to produce our students who can be a social influencer or can be a leader, digital leader, for example, into the right direction that you want to bring the country. Technology use, monitoring and control, technology design and programming, resilience, stress tolerance and flexibility, as well as reasoning, problem solving, and ideation. So you can see that there are several types of skill here, which is problem solving, self-management, which is about, as you mentioned just now, control stress, kan? Resilience, stress tolerance, and flexibility. Working with people, which is basically to become an influencer, being a leader, and technology use and development. Okay, so there are also these are the skills that is needed for 2025. But if let's say we continue to give the lecture to the students, you know, for example, even we just conducting an online lecture like what I'm doing right now, for example, and then just talk and talk without any engagement, without any interaction with everyone. Like everybody is just, sit down and listen. And even we repeat the same thing in the class. I'm just giving a lecture. I do not engage with you. Even maybe I just throw a question. Do you understand about this or not? To the student, and then student will just simply say yes or no, for example, right? So these are not helping the students to develop their skills. We may argue saying that okay, students may get all these skills in their co-curriculum activities, but not all curriculum or society activities they can get this kind of skills. They are still doing the same old, right? So for example, like if let's say we're going to give them a complex problem solving, they are not going to get a complex problem solving skill, especially on the technical stuff that we are teaching them outside of the class. They need to get it inside of our class. And again, if just give them lecture, if we just give them tutorial based on the textbook, for example, and that's it, how can they get complex problem solving skill? For example, again, if let's say we are just giving them a project, okay, write an essay about something and do it 4 to 5 of you together, and end up only one people who are doing it and everybody else is just, uh, is free riding on their friends. So how do we actually develop creativity, for example, originality, reasoning, for example? I mean, how can they benefit well from this kind of activities or these assignments that we give them inside the class? So we need to start to think about what best can we accommodate the student, what best can we teach the students to make sure that the students acquire all of these skills, so that by the time they graduated, they are ready to move into the job market and get the right job for them with the appropriate skills that they have. But there are also current issues facing university students as for now. First of all, I think many of the students, when you start to ask them what are the purpose of coming to university, they are not sure. They say is that just because that my parents asked me to do so, or maybe because I just want to go university because this is where everybody goes to, and I just want to get the certificate, and I will decide where I'm going to work or what I'm going to do afterwards. So they're losing the big why of why they come to university. But at the same time, there's also a dilemma. For example, like with the current ranking university fees and with the parent income, there is no more scholarship. Not many scholarships are available around. Versus whenever that they go out and they find a difficulty to get job, for example, future income is uncertain, and then there is a debt is coming, for example, because of the having to borrow, make loan from PTPTN, for example, and then paying the debt. So these are actually the challenges among the students that they are facing right now. Number 3 is actually the skills deficient for future job market, which means that they do not have the right skills for them to enter the job market. As I mentioned earlier, in 2025, we're requiring these kind of skills, but it has never been taught. They have never get the opportunity to learn throughout their university years, so they do not have the right skills for them for the future job market. And another issue is actually with a very conservative teaching and learning practices. For example, like we are just still teaching, slide by slide, going one by one, and not involving students in the high order thinking skills activities. So that actually cause a problem to the students, and this will cause them the future issues where they will not be able to get the right skills as needed. So the student will ask, actually, if let's say a very critical student, they will ask you, so tell me why I still need to go to university when actually I can just learn all these courses online all by myself. For example, I just attend some kind of Google certificates and I got lot more knowledge from that. So I still need to go to university. So these are the current issues that we have to think, and we have to remember these are the challenges that face our students nowadays. Apparently, many of our students, when they come into university, they just become a surface and strategic learners. Yesterday, I conducted a class, and my first class yesterday, so I asked them, for example, what is your expectation for this class? And then some of the students, I think many of the students said this. They said that this because the course is they perceive as tough, thermodynamic subject. So they said as long as I pass this course, so that is the expectation. That's number one. Another way is actually they just say that okay, I just want to get good grades, right? And only like one or two students out of 80 or 90 students only said that I want to use this knowledge for my real life application, so that is my expectation. So that's the challenge that these particular students we are facing right now, because most of the students, because they just follow the trend, they come into university and they turn up, and because of the previous education system that they has undergone with, okay, a lot of the things is very teacher centered, a lot of the things are being spoon fed, for example, so they end up to become a surface and strategic learner. What does it mean by surface and strategic learner? If let's say they come to you and ask, sir, will this be asked in the exam? Or they will just simply say, I think the lecturer didn't teach this at all. Or maybe you can just simply say, how can I can easily remember this? Or is this counted for our coursework mark? And they become very exam oriented. There are lots of memorization. These are the characteristics of the surface learner. So the surface learner, if they come to you say that, all right, I just want you to tell me what I need to know. That's it. So that is a very, very shallow learner, surface learner. But if let's say you start to have students who come to you and then, okay, what you're saying is right, what this fellow saying is also right, and so on and so on. So the students are not be able to make some weightage, give some weightage on the opinions. These are also, we call it as surface learner. But once the students start to see that, okay, whenever that they learn something new, they'll be able to relate the topics with what they have learned in the past, for example, or they'll be able to connect into something else which is out of the topics. Then this is what we call as relativism. The students started to become what we would call as deep learner. And when the student put a commitment, they know that they need to make decision, and they know that in order for me to make decision, this is my fact. I put this evidence, I justify, this is how I justify my decision. This is actually what we want to groom them to become a deep learner, where they put their commitment in it. One of the way to observe the students whether they are actually surface learner or deep learner is by simply testing them about by using solo taxonomy, for example. Solo taxonomy stands for structure of observed learning outcome. Okay, observed learning outcome, solo taxonomy. And in this particular taxonomy is divided into 5 levels, 5 taxonomy. The first one is actually we call as pre-structural level. Okay. The second one is unistructural level, multi-structural level, relational level, as well as at the extended abstract level. So if the pre-structural level, when you ask students about something, they said that I'm not sure, I do not know. So that students is not sure about the subject at all, so they do not have any kind of understanding. But when the students have only one idea about the subject, so for example, like when you ask them about what is a cat, for example. A cat has fur, for example. That's the answer. So he has only one understanding about that, one idea about that. That is still surface understanding. And multi-structural level, they'll be able to give several ideas, but it is not connecting to each other. Okay? It is not connected to each other. They can just be able to divide, to classify something. For example, like they said, the farm fresh milk has several brand, several type, which is the kurma fresh milk, and so on. That's it. But they do not know into the detail of it. Relational level is where actually you teach them something new. They'll be able to connect the information with the past information that you have taught them. So that students started to see the bigger picture of it. But when the students be able to connect whatever information that you teach them inside the class, and they be able to connect with the real world application, they be able to connect it with different topics, different subject that has been taught by other lecturers, for example. This is what we call as at the standard abstract level. So the students started to see the ideas in a new and different ways. So the relational level as well as at the extended abstract level, this is where actually the students have what we call as deep understanding about the topics. Okay, about deep understanding about the subject matter. And we want our students to be in that category, because we know at the moment there are very few of them in this particular category. Even some of our students who actually score for flat, they are not necessarily a deep learner. They might be just a strategic learner, because they'll be able to spot the question, because this has been taught in the past. Spotting exam question, for example, has been taught in the past. So they spot it right, they know the pattern, they study the pattern, and then they got it. And then they'll be able to nail it. But if let's say you ask them about different topics, different things, they'll not be able to answer you well. So this is just a strategic learner, but not a deep learner. So what is actually hybrid teaching? I want to ask you again the question here. Okay, so we have add-on things here: problem solving skill, human skill, technical skill. What do you think hybrid teaching is about? So I hope that you can take your mobile again, go to www.menti.com and use the code 28697526. So please respond to me. What do you think hybrid teaching is all about? Okay. Any more ideas? Okay. Kind of flip classroom. Kind of. Any more? What do you think? So we have here three responses: combining face-to-face and online. That's number one. Mixed style of teaching, kind of a flipped classroom, question mark there. Various medium, combinations of methods and combination of approach. Use whiteboard and also projector. Okay. All right. So face-to-face and online at the same time. Wow. Okay. Maybe mixed teaching with practical. Okay. All right. Thank you for the response. So let me bring back to you to the slide. What is actually hybrid teaching? If you are looking at online learning spectrum, and then you can see that from here, this is less online and this is more online. Okay. Face-to-face is where actually you just use bricks and mortar classroom, traditional classroom. Everybody be in the classroom and have a face-to-face teaching like we used to have in the past, in before COVID, before pandemic. Okay. Technology may or may not be used to enhance learning. We can also use inside the class, for example, like Mentimeter I used just now. I can also use that as part of my engagement inside the class. So this is what we call as face-to-face. Another practice that has been also been promoted in the past is what we call as blended learning. Blended learning is where actually, for example, like you have a class, and then after the class you say, okay, now class, I would like you to go to the forum in the e-learning, and I would like you to respond to that forum. Okay. Sometimes the activity of the online learning, online activity is disjointed with the face-to-face activity. It's just a continuous sequence to that. But it does not, if let's say, for example, it is not there, it also still doesn't make any change to that physical face-to-face. Which means that if let's say you tak buat some kind of activity online tu pun, dia tidaklah menyebabkan the blended learning is the face-to-face learning to affected. All right. So most of the time, the students will feel that they have so many things to do. For example, like they have to do some things online. They have also to do something in the class. So blended learning can also sometimes can go haywire if, let's say, it is not being planned properly. Okay, on the other side, the other end is actually online. Online is where we doing all the activity as online as what we did during the pandemic. Okay, we do not have any face-to-face class at all. We actually rely everything is on the making Zoom platform or Google Meet. Maybe we conduct teaching whether it can be synchronous or it can be asynchronous. For example, even the exam, it can be a proctored exam, and everybody need to open the camera and answer the exam. So that is fully online. What hybrid teaching means is actually there is online and face-to-face are integrated, but a substantial amount of seat time, which means that the students still meet face-to-face, but with more meaningful activities. It's no longer just sit in front and listen to the lecture. So if, let's say, you do hybrid teaching, you claim that you're doing hybrid teaching, but you're conducting a lecture face-to-face, that is not hybrid teaching. That may be just a blended teaching. Okay, because most of the time the seat time, the face-to-face ni is usually being fulfilled for much more meaningful activities. Okay, and then some of the lecture hours too, lecture time is being substituted with internet-based activities. So that is what we call as hybrid teaching. There is a website here, and I think I picked most of it from here that I'll be sharing with you. And at glance, okay, hybrid teaching at a glance. Imagine this is our typical class, our usual class, where the students are sitting and facing the lecturers, okay? But this is our traditional classroom. But somehow, when we do hybrid teaching, it's actually a combination of any one of these, all right? So from this side, you can see that there is a discussion, a facilitated discussion. For example, like the students come in and try to create some kind of prototype, for example. They need to be together. And you are there as the lecturer, as the educator, go from one table to another table just to facilitate the discussion. Or perhaps you are asking them to do some kind of project or solving some problem. And some of the students, they need to do research. Some of the students need to create something, but they need to be doing as a team, for example. Or maybe perhaps they are doing some kind of project presentation. So that is also, maybe they are doing an online project, but they need to present it face-to-face. So that is also kind of a hybrid teaching. And then, for example, like they have a field trip, and then after that, they need to do some kind of reflection online. They need to have some meeting online later. So that could be a hybrid teaching. And online discussion here is basically maybe is being used to support all these kind of activities. Similarly, if let's say we decided to use like virtual reality or augmented reality, the students are using this particular tool so that it enhance their understanding, so they can solve the problem, for example. So they can be in their team members to have a much more rich discussion. Individual online learning is where actually they start to do on their own, to learn on their own, take their own me time. For example, like reviewing the materials, looking at the lectures, watching the videos, for example. So that can be considered as part of the a combination of all of these. This is where actually hybrid teaching is being made. Okay, so if let's say, for example, if just continuously using online discussion all the time, that is not hybrid teaching lah. But if let's say you start to give them, okay, I'm going to give you a problem. They come into the class and then you give them a problem. Okay, class, for the next 4 weeks, I'm going to give you a problem. This is the problem that you need to solve. So the students need to actually, maybe towards the end, they need to design something like this, okay? But along the way, they need to have an online discussion. They need to have individual online learning. They need to go to the field trip so that they'll be able to comprehend their understanding better. And then they need to have a discussion, so they can have a face-to-face, they can have also online discussion. and finally they make the project presentation. Okay, so that is, you can see how hybrid is being done there. There are times that they meet face to face, and it is a very meaningful face to face meeting, and a lot more other time they are doing it online. Either they are using it individually or they are having discussion online. Okay, so why hybrid teaching? The first one is actually to allow the students to experience the best of both physical face-to-face class and online learning. Okay, so because when you're doing online learning, there are something that is very good from online learning. Even right now, I think when we have been doing online learning for the past 1 year, we start to notice that, okay, this is also not bad. It saves a lot of time actually. Okay, for example, from jumping from one class to another class, if let's say we just want to address low taxonomy of Bloom taxonomy, low Bloom taxonomy inside our class, for example, we just want to have a short lecture, why not conduct online learning, online lecture rather than having a face-to-face lecture. It saves a lot of more time. At the same time, if let's say we want to allow the students to have some kind of self-directed learning, self-learning, they can have attended some of the courses where they can learn on their own. That is on online learning. But at the same time, physical face-to-face class is also important, especially when it is about physical, it is about reaching the intimacy of the class, for example, and you want to check the physical progress of the students. For example, if let's say you want them to solve complex problem solving as a team, so that will be much more meaningful if they are meeting face-to-face. Okay, so that is the first reason why we do hybrid teaching. The second one is for us to allow greater flexibility, so that we know that we have a learning outcome that we want to attain, intended learning outcome that we want to attain. If let's say we just use face to face, maybe there will be some kind of lacking parts that we will not be able to achieve it very well. Even if we're using it fully online, also there are some other things that we will not be able to achieve it. So we decided on hybrid, so it allows a greater flexibility on that. And number three is actually to make full use of the campus resources, because I know that many of the universities, they subscribe on certain platform, for example, for online. At the same time, they also have infrastructure such as classes. So how do we do well for these resources that we have? And so that we'll be able to support individual and collaborative learning. So what we can do for hybrid teaching? So these are the things that we can do in hybrid teaching. For example, like the most important part is actually you do not see this kind of activities as on its own, but it is supposed actually to be linking each other. Okay, so for example, like you start to see the problem, the physical face-to-face team-based problem solving, for example. So while solving the problem, student need to do some kind of online assessment. Student need to do some kind of online engagement so that they be able to get some information to solve the problem. Or perhaps you're giving them some kind of team-based activities. They still be able to do some activities online in order for them to solve the problem. You can have them being with you so that you can have individual progress check, inquiry-based field trip, because sometimes virtual trip is not that efficient as seeing it on your own. So you need to go by having a field trip, guided discovery activities, so that students doing some kind of discovery activities and they were guided on it. Project presentation, role play, for example, like you need the students to be together so that they can have role play. It is much more efficient to use it face to face. But if let's say you want to do it online, they can have a forum and discussion online because of the time. You want them to have an asynchronous activities. Maybe when you start to open the forum, it can take about few hours before they finish and everybody contributing the ideas. Instead of like, when you have a class, you have a very limited hours. You have only 1 hour for them to do so. So why not all this discussion and forum to be done online, for example? If let's say the students need to do individual reading and do their own discovery, maybe they can just do it online. Online assignment, for example, online global engagement, that is also another thing that you can do. For example, right now, because of the borderless classroom, okay, they can connect with the students from different part of the world, and actually they can do project together. If let's say we are collaborating with different lecturers out there at other schools, at other country, for example. So the students can benefit from it by having an online global engagement. They can also have online engagement, for example, like if let's say they have done some kind of field trip, they miss some kind of information, they need to recontact the managers, the supervisors at the plant, for example. They just do some kind of online engagement with them, further interview them online without having to go to that place again. And they can also have online learning material review. So you can see that there are a lot of hybrid that could be done between the physical face-to-face as well as online learning comes together. Okay. So let's have a look at how best that we could do this online hybrid teaching. Okay, hybrid teaching. How best we could do this. This is also some lengthy part that I'm going to explain. The most important part where actually we need to understand ourselves first is this, we need to adhere to this guiding principle. We call it as constructive alignment. And I think that MQA has been addressing this a lot of the time about making sure that our learning outcomes are aligned with the assessment as well as aligned with the teaching and learning activities. So whenever that we have a learning outcome, we have spelled out the learning outcomes that we have in the class, okay? And we have to make sure that it is aligned together with the assessment as well as the teaching and learning activities. What it is meant here is that, for example, like you have a learning outcome, students to be able to analyze certain information related to blah, 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 blah. Or maybe student to be able to design something in your class. So that is your intended learning outcomes. And then towards the end, you want to make sure that you can assess them. So if let's say you want to assess the students to be able to design on something, of course you want to observe what are the design work that they have done. So you want to give mark from that. If let's say you want the students to be able to analyze on something, so you really want to see that how the analysis is being done. Okay. So the teaching and learning activities is where actually we activate the verb of the learning outcomes. Okay, the learning outcomes need to be activated. The verb itself need to be activated. For example, if let's say you want the students to be able to design on something, students be able to propose or evaluate and make some comparison, contrast something, for example, student to analyze something, and you are assessing them in the final part of the assessment, you have to make sure that those activities are being activated inside the class. So you cannot just simply say, okay, students, okay, in order for you, if let's say your learning outcome is design, and then what you do is just you give a lecture. In order for you to design blah, 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 you have to do this, and that. And students never been given chance in order for them to do the design. And finally, they were tasked to do the design. Of course, definitely the learning outcome cannot be achieved. Similarly, if let's say you want the students to be able to do some kind of analysis, okay, let's do this kind of analysis. I mean, you give the learning outcome is to analyze something, and then you assess them, do some analysis of this. But in your class, we just do, okay, in order for you to do this analysis, you have to do this and this and this and that. You just give lecture. So that is why actually the assessment, when you're doing assessment, the students will not be able to answer you very well. Another possibility is that your learning outcome has a very low taxonomy. Okay, low, if you refer to the Bloom taxonomy, is actually only students should be able to describe on something, for example. So if let's say you just want the students to be able to describe on something, and then you assess them finally, describe on certain things, describe on this principle, describe on this theory. But in your teaching and learning activities, you start to offer them problem-based learning because you feel that it is cooler to do that and it is trending right now, problem-based learning. So I want to do problem-based learning. Student will come to you and complain to you and say that I do not need this problem-based learning because even without problem-based learning, by just giving me lecture, I'll be able to do the assessment very well. So that is why it is very important for us to really observe what is the learning outcome that we state, okay, assess them accordingly, but most importantly is to activate the verbs inside the class. So this is where actually we start to think about, could hybrid teaching solve our problem? So when you have the intended outcome, you need to have what is our intended outcomes to our students. Okay, then that is why actually we start to think about what are the hybrid teaching activities that we can conduct to meet the intended outcomes. Okay, so for example, like if let's say students should be able to design on something. Okay, um, so students should be able to design the power plant, for example, design or construct the power plant, mini power plant. So that is the final outcome. So when you start to think about design or construct mini power plant, okay, you start to imagine that, oh, is there going to be some kind of prototype? Okay, definitely the students cannot just do it online. Okay, definitely it's not online. Definitely they cannot just be at their own place. They need to come together and sit down and do it together as a team. That's number one. The second one, the time that you want them to spend inside the class is going to be longer, or is for example, can you support that with online activities? For example, perhaps the initial discussion could be done just by doing Zoom, for example, or perhaps some kind of other activities could be done by using, for example, if let's say they wanted to see they wanted to see the real power plant, you bring them for field trip first, and then after that they come back, they need to do some kind of further interview with the supervisor or the engineers, so they can just do it online with Google Meet, for example. So this is where actually the hybrid activities that you can start to think of, so it meets your intended outcomes. Okay, because if let's say you can ask yourself, can this be achieved fully online? I don't think so, because just now the learning outcome is about design the power plant, right? Can it be achieved fully face to face? Yes, but it's gonna take a lot of their time inside the class. So there are also some time that you can reduce. For example, like they can do peer teaching activities online rather than peer teaching in the class, for example. And how hybrid can make it better? So these are the questions that you can ask the students. Okay. And then finally, whenever that you want to assess them, how the students are being assessed. Do you want them to make presentation? Do you want them to write a report? Do you want them to show the prototype? Do you want them to demonstrate on something? This could be done either online, or this could be done either by face-to-face. Okay. And then you may want to also start to think what the hybrid assessment that works well as well. Can I ask the student to do the reflection online? Maybe they could record their video reflection. So these are all the things that happen online. It does not happen face to face. So this is how a holistic way of creating a hybrid teaching to every one of us. Another thing that we want to consider is whenever that we are making hybrid teaching, we have to ensure that it fulfills these particular lenses in how people learn framework. How people learn framework, I think as have been repeated in the past, is actually a framework that has been developed by J.D. Bransford. He had studied more than 1,000 learning research on teaching and learning. Okay, and he coined there are 4 lenses that we need to fulfill to ensure that the learning happen and meaningful learning happen. So the first one is what we call as knowledge centered. Knowledge centered means that the students be able to organize the knowledge outcomes around the fundamentals of the discipline. So if let's say they have a certain discipline, they'll be able to connect the information that they are having right now with the information in the past and information that they're going to use in the future. For example, like if let's say you start to give them some kind of activity or some task that could relate their previous knowledge, as well as be able to connect it to the future real world application, so it has already fulfilled as what we call as knowledge centered. The second lens that we have to take into action is the learner centered. Learner centered is where actually we take into account the learner's background, their preconception, the connection to real life context. What means here is that the students, we need to understand the learner's background before we start to give them. Of course, we have our intended outcomes, but in order for us to make sure that the outcomes is being achieved, we need to understand what is the category of our learners. Who are they? Where they are from? What is the demographic? What is actually their what do you call that? What is actually their habit? All right, their habit, their trend, because we cannot simply just use whatever that works from us in the past to them, because you know that the current generation change, for example. the way how they do things changed. Now they are more tech savvy, for example. So how do we take the tech savvy elements inside from them so that it can achieve our outcomes? That is the learner centered. The third one is assessment centered. Assessment centered is where actually we start to reflect the learning goals and aid students in getting feedback on current performance to enable improvement. So what this means here is that whenever that we're doing any kind of assessment, it has to come from, it has to aid as a feedback to the students. So the students get the feedback to make sure that they learn and improve from that. So if let's say you're giving them a project, so it's not simply a project where actually you give them, okay, this week I'm going to give a project in week 3. You have to submit by week 14, okay? And then you never check the progress along the way. And then definitely the student will do in week 13. That's the best they could do. And maybe the worst is actually the night before submission. That night they are doing the project. Okay? So you're not, because you're not giving them any kind of feedback. Or sometimes the students submit to you and then you're not giving them any feedback, and then this is where actually things go wrong. So students will just think that what they are doing is right, and then they just proceed and they give you a very low quality assignment. So whenever that we're doing any kind of assessment, okay, please bear in mind that we have to do formative and summative assessment so that the students can get feedback from time to time. So that is assessment centered. Finally is what we call as community centered. So whenever that we want to do any face-to-face teaching or online learning or hybrid learning, hybrid teaching, for example, we have to make sure that the element of community centered is fulfilled. What this meant here is student and instructor as part of the learning community. Student feel safe to do mistake. Student feel safe to ask question. Student do not feel, and then you entertain any kind of question, right? Students feel that they can improve even they are making mistake in the past. So they can be better and better. And they've been supported on that. So that's what we call as community-centered. So if let's say we're doing hybrid teaching, students have their own online support group so that we can give them some support. Whenever the students enter the class, they feel safe to talk to each other. They feel safe to actually ask you questions, for example. So this is what community-centered is all about. Another important element that also we need to put is what we call as scaffolding. So scaffolding is where actually you start to give the students, because if let's say you don't support the student will just maintain to the individual level. If let's say they have a learning outcome, you have learning outcome to the students, of course the learning outcome is very high to achieve. If you're not supporting them, they will just maintain at their own level. But when you start to give them some scaffold, okay, some scaffold so that they climb, so they will be able to reach the learning outcome that is needed. So if let's say we are giving them hybrid teaching, you need to think about what kind of scaffolding activities that we could do to support the students' learning. So again, if let's say we give them a problem-based learning, how do we make sure that throughout the way they are being scaffolded, whether it is online or whether it is physical face-to-face? So we can think about and plan about it. So whenever that we are doing hybrid teaching activities, please bear in mind that what also the activities of scaffolding that you want to put inside the hybrid teaching approach. When we are using student-centered learning approach, in the past, we have always think this is only possible by using physical face-to-face. But right now, if let's say you want to do this, but now because after a year that we are doing teaching online, it is still also possible for us to do this kind of activities online, but maybe not as smooth and efficient as what we wish. For example, yesterday, I think my student had never do any kind of breakout activities before. So when I started to break them out, they are clueless on what to do. Everybody's still muting microphones and not talking to each other, so they're not solving the problem. So I reflected on myself. I think that I need to give them much more complex problem, because I think the questions that I gave yesterday was a bit easy for them to just doing only 1 or 2% discuss by themselves. They can just do it. So I need to give a bit more complex so that they have, as a team, 4 to 5 of them can solve the problem together and at much a longer time. So that's what my reflection when I do my breakout activities yesterday in my class. So again here, whenever that we look at, for example, if let's say you're deciding on active learning and collaborative learning, cooperative learning, PBL, for example, if we want to use this kind of approach and we want to do hybrid teaching, for example, we can start to think about how does the small things or activities inside active learning or cooperative learning or PBL can be done online. So we start, and then only the meaningful activities, if let's say they are doing it face to face, then we can do it face to face. Most of the thing we can revert to online activities. So the students know that they can get support both in face to face class as well as online learning class. So one of the approach, as rightly pointed, someone said that, is it something got to do with flipped classroom? Hybrid teaching can be considered like a flipped classroom. Excuse me for a while. Hybrid teaching, it can be considered, hybrid teaching, flipped classroom can be considered as hybrid teaching, but not as much as what hybrid teaching aspire to be. Okay, the idea of flipped classroom in the past is that the students were given, for example, the students were given some kind of materials for them to review. So they have attended, they need to go through the video, the lectures online. They go through the video and then they have some quizzes, for example. And then when they finish reviewing the materials, they come inside the class. The lecturer or the teacher will discuss more thoroughly the concept with them inside the class. Or maybe there are some kind of activities, some kind of tutorial to support the students' understanding inside the class. And then after that, finish the activity. So that is flipped classroom. One of which that we've been trying to do in the past is what we call as flipped cooperative learning approach. For example, like before the class, the students again were given some kind of videos to watch. Students are given some kind of problem so that they had something in mind that, okay, this is a problem that they need to address. But at the same time, they also provided avenue for them to have online discussion, online forum. They're also doing some kind of online engagement using online approach. Okay, so this is where the hybrid teaching comes in. So when they come to the class, perhaps what we can do as well in hybrid teaching is the recap session. It doesn't necessarily be inside the class, because the students can involve, even though we are just doing by Mentimeter, the students can do the brainstorming, for example. So that can be saved. We can save time. Instead of doing it in class, we can just do it online together with the students. But when they come to the class, they can just do in-class activities. This is where actually a deeper understanding, much more facilitated activities could be done to them. If you think that the less facilitation is needed, then things can be done online. But if let's say you need to have a much more facilitated activities, this is where we bring the students inside the class. When we bring the students inside the class, so we need to think about some kind of complex activities so that they be able to do it as a team together. They have more thorough discussion with you inside the class. So this is what we call as in-class activities. And finally, when they go back to their own space, then we can ask them to do reflection online, ataupun they be able to give some kind of feedback, or they be able to share with their friends what is actually going on. So why we said here cooperative learning is because that the students starting from the early semester, they have been assigned as a team. So whenever that they come inside the class, they will join their team members. It's not like they can simply randomly join here and there. And this is where actually where we start to have a team building with them. So the team building can be done face to face, and then sharing of expectation, and then they are doing some kind of profiling so that we can actually group them together. Along the way, throughout the semester, the students need to peer rate each other. They need to give feedback to each other. They need to give constructive feedback, appreciative feedback to the team members. And this could be also done either online, or this could be also done face to face. So we can just and the students as a cooperative team, okay, they stick together, fulfilling. There are certain principles that need to adhere. The first thing first is, whenever that we give any task, it has to be positive interdependence between them, which means that they are depending on each other. If let's say we sing together. If let's say we rise together. So that is the first principle of cooperative learning. The second one is there must be some kind of face-to-face mutual interaction. So promotive interaction, for example, like they are meeting with each other in order for them to solve problem, and they're also meeting with the instructors so that they get some kind of guideline. And the third approach is actually they need to have individual accountability. So each of them have accountability in order for them to fulfill this. So that's why I call it as flipped cooperative learning approaches. And if you need to know more, there'll be some other trainings for cooperative learning, so that we can integrate together with our activities, the flipped classroom combined with cooperative learning. This is one of the examples that we can do in terms of our hybrid teaching. Okay. All right. So on the last part of the outline, okay. Alhamdulillah, I think I still have a lot more time, so we can have a discussion. Maybe some kind of question later. There will be some ideas and tips for hybrid teaching. Okay. The first thing first is actually we need to start small and incremental. What it is meant here is, whenever that you want to start on something, do not start as a big one. Do not like overhaul the whole course. You may want to address only one learning outcomes. Maybe the first time you're doing hybrid teaching is just for the next 3 to 4 weeks, okay? And then you start to improve the materials and content from time to time. So that's where actually you may want to do, start small and incremental. Tips number two is actually you focus on the instructional design, which means that we need to decide what kind of approaches that we want to do first inside our class and online. What type of activities that we want to do, okay? And technology is just the enabler, which means that later only then we start to think about, okay, how best I can use technology in this, how best I could use a technology online during online session, what kind of activities and what kind of technology that could support this. This is where actually you may think later, after we have decided what kind of activities and instructional design that we want to have for our hybrid teaching. Number three is use resources readily available, so which means that if let's say, for example, you do not have VR, AR, do not worry. You don't have to use that. Okay, if you have, make use of that. That's very important. Okay, if let's say you do not have a space for the furniture, smart classroom, whatsoever for the discussion, it's okay. But the most important part is the student be able to just take a chair and sit down together as a group and then discuss about it. I think that's very important as well. Number four, do as a team, not alone. So here, if let's say you have a faculty members, anyone who are also doing hybrid teaching, talk to each other, create a community among themselves. At the same time, if let's say you are plan to do it, I would rather do it as part of the integrated project, because I know that by doing as integrated project, I can have other team members from different courses come together and design together this hybrid teaching. If you're doing it alone, again, as I said, you may do it alone, but you have to start it small, because otherwise you're going to be very overwhelmed with actually the planning of putting all the activities and all the technology that you want to use. So do as a team, not alone. Number five is actually managing the students' expectation. So you need from time to time get the feedback from the students. The students will honestly give you feedback whether it is okay for them to get through, whether they are fine with it, or they will feel overwhelmed with so many assignments. Because what happens is sometimes there is a tendency to make the course become the course loading become bigger when they claim to do hybrid teaching. So you have to make sure that if let's say you're not doing it face to face, in the past, do not just simply add it to become things that you have to do online. Okay, you can take whatever that you have done in face-to-face and bring it online, but do not simply, for example, like copy. You still proceed with whatever that you're doing face-to-face, and on top of that, you add some more online. So you have to really manage the student expectation on this. You're preparing for the challenges and the troubles. This is also something that you have to do. You have to bear in mind that the first time may not be right. There might be a lot of hiccups, and do not just simply be traumatized on that experience. Do not simply be despairing and then you just leave it and then, okay, I just want to continue with my lecture. That's it. So prepare for troubles, prepare for some kind of, but do make reflection on that. Try to think about what can be done better. What can you do better? Maybe I could put some kind of gamification element inside that, or maybe I could actually reduce the loading for the students. Maybe it's too much, for example. So these are the things that we need to constantly reflect ourselves. And number 7 is actually don't neglect for little things. Okay, don't simply just feel that, okay, it's okay, I just design all this helicopter view, but there are some little things that we do not plan very well. For example, like if we want to conduct the class session, there are heavy activities right after the long day for the students. I think it's not suitable for them. Maybe you are putting them, you giving them, maybe you said, okay, it's just a tiny task, but when it is a tiny task, you need to know that the students are not only taking our course, they're also taking other courses as well. So they may have actually problems with completing the task that we need. So this is where we don't neglect the little things, right? So let me ask you a question again. Okay. How hybrid teaching can fail? So let's put on menti.com and use the same code 28697526 and share with me how hybrid teaching can fail. Please share your thoughts with me. And I think you can also foresee this, how this can fail, so you can respond to this. Let's say I give you until 11, like 3 to 4 minutes so that we can complete this. Okay, how hybrid teaching can fail. I think the first thing that we got here is students reluctant to participate. Yeah, I think that is very true. If let's say the students are not being convinced why they need to do this is where actually we start to, in the first place, we need to let them know. For example, just now in the early lecture, I asked what are the skills needed, right, for the future. So there are actually proven evidence to show that these particular skills you cannot just simply get it by attending my lecture. You need to participate in the activities. Otherwise, you will definitely not be able to be successful when you graduate later. So I think those are the things that we need to do. Again, when the students didn't want to participate, bad design, unsuitable assessment. I think that is very true as well. If let's say, for example, you just pick it, jumble everything together. In terms of design, you do not put a really you do not put your thoughts inside there, and it is unsuitable. Okay, assessment is unsuitable. And then therefore another one is actually no supervision on students' progress. Again, I clearly agree with you, which means that you're not checking their progress, you're not monitoring them, you're not giving them feedback. Teachers fail to feel emotions and empathy. I think not having empathy is also another issue. Like we just bought them with so many things, and then without really care about whether they are able to do it, whether we need to scaffold them, for example. When students are disengaged by doing something else on other screen, this is also equivalently true. But if let's say you start having them on the face-to-face, this is where actually we can pull them out back to us, right? Inactive communication activity from the lecturer, that is true as well. If we just claim hybrid teaching, you just give lecture and then lepas tu in the online pula you bagi online discussion and forum, you do not participate, don't call that as a hybrid. Do not call that as hybrid. Okay, student not pass the subject, so which means that hybrid teaching failed. Okay, lack of student engagement, yes, again, I agree with you. So but then we need to really convince the students why they need to engage is because they need those skills. It is not us, it is them. We already secured our job, right? But for them, they need to have these particular skills in order for them to really be able to get the skills needed so that they be able to get the job. Lack of engagement in classes and less activities may not interest the students. First class may be success, but along the way, students may lose interest. Same style of teaching, yes. If we keep repeating again and again the same format, the same routine, there is also a danger behind that because students can already predict you. Okay, students can predict you what's you're gonna do, and it makes them loss of interest. Okay, so we need to think about, if let's say you want to have certain kind of activities, try to play around with different kind of activities. Do not simply just stick to one and keep repeating it again and again. Even though it looks, the first time it looks fantastic, but the second and third time they already feel, there's nothing out of this. So we need to be a bit more creative in order for us to produce a creative student. Bad internet line connection during hybrid teaching, that is also equivalently true, but we can also think about asynchronous activities. So asynchronous activity means that we can allocate some time for the students. So the students have plenty of time for them to go through the material on their own. So it's not like having a lecture like what we are doing right now. Okay, so that is actually, thank you very much for the feedback. So I got 11 response here. I have some from me that I can share with you about what can cause hybrid teaching fail. So what is meant by cost and a half syndrome is you already conducted something on face-to-face and it's already meeting the student learning time, the SLT, but you add some more to the online part. So students feel that there are so many jobs to be done, and that's why it becomes a cost and a half syndrome, which means that students need to do more. And students going to be very overwhelmed and you not be able to get good support from the students to make sure that hybrid learning or hybrid teaching successfully done. One. Number two is what we call as parallel universe. Okay, universe is working parallelly. It's not joining together, which means that when we design the hybrid teaching, you are doing face-to-face or something else, we're doing online on something else. It's not supporting each other. So that is how hybrid learning can fit. Okay, it's not joining up together. Number three is limited interaction online. This is where actually most of the time we just allow the students to do individual work. We do not have platform for the students to have online discussion. We do not have platform for the students to have online forum. We do not have platform for the students to have an online session with you, live session, for example. And we just allow the student, okay, do it on your own. And then we call it hybrid. That is a failure for the hybrid teaching. But I think number four, this is also very important, is same old assessment. What is meant here is actually the students, they are actually, what do you call that? We provide hybrid teaching avenue for them. That's very fantastic. We provide avenue for them to do problem-based learning, for example, or project-based learning, when we combine the assessment in physical class as well as online learning together. But towards the end, we come up with the similar traditional exam that we have done in the past, closed book exam. we giving them some kind of assessment which is similar in the past, which is the same old. Okay, so where else actually we can use alternative assessment for that matter? We can ask the student to write e-portfolio, for example. We can ask the student to write a reflective experience about what they have been going through, instead of just simply attempting themselves to the individual examination. Why not we come up with open-ended assessment? Why not we come up with open-ended examination, for example? Why we have to go back to the closed-ended examination when actually we have designs very fantastic activities in hybrid teaching, but we stick to the closed-ended examination, right? So this is where actually hybrid teaching can fail. If you look at number 4, same old assessment, this shows that, okay, you're trying to align your learning outcome with the teaching and learning activities, but you're not aligning it with the assessment. So that is also when it is not aligned to each other, the teaching and learning, the learning outcomes may not be achieved very well. So that's how hybrid learning can fail. Okay. Right, I think that's all for my slide. I finished earlier, Dr. Rashdan. Alhamdulillah. If you have any question and answer, so I would be very happy to answer you. So I stop my screen sharing for now.
Okay,
Uh,
thank you very much Dr. Tazli. So kita akan buat question and answer session. So there are some
uh,
questions yang kita boleh tengok pada ruangan komen. Well, the first question is from Zurina Zainal Abidin. Salam, do you know any particular online model or test for suitable personality and learning styles profiling?
oh, okay. There are a lot of tests that we can do. For example, like in what I choose to do is I stick to Personality Plus by Florence Litour. I think there is a quiz. There is you can Google it, Personality Plus test, and I give it to my students so that the students be able to answer it. The second one is you can also use the Index of Learning Styles by Felder and Solomon. Okay, so Felder and Solomon, they have this. Let me check. I think there is online index. If you Google Index of Learning Styles questionnaire, so the first one, if you get from North Carolina State Web Tools, you can use that tools in order for you to give the student, so the student be able to actually do the personality learning styles. So for example, like what are the style of the students, you have some pre-information of the student. This is where actually, if you remember the how people learn framework that I shared just now, that is fulfilling the learner-centered part lah, trying to understand the learning. Yep, those are the two things that you can use. You can also use like bird test. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Tazli. I think this is a comment from Afiq Laziz. I'm so glad that I had a free on-job training from you when I was your GA in UTP in 2017. Now I see that all the activities that you were teaching in class is useful for active or hybrid teaching. Ada nak
Uh,
komen apa-apa, Dr. Tazli?
Tak ada apa. Assalamualaikum Dr. Afiq. Sekarang Dr. Afiq. Dia dah jadi lecturer.
Okay. Oh, Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Okay, so another question from Rosmaliza Kamaluddin. Usually, alternative assessments are taxing on the lecturers to grade, especially when they have more than 50 students in the class. How do we design alternative assessment that is manageable for large classes? Betul. Jadi bila kita buat online dan juga yang unik-unik ni selalunya akan ambil masa lah. So macam mana tu? How do you go around that?
I think Dr. Rosmaliza ni lagi tahu jawapan dia, cik. Tak apa, it's okay. I can answer that. I think the most important part is actually, I think we are so much, kita dah terlalu what do you call that, get used to what do you call as in our courses kita kata okay, we're going to give 3 tests, 1 quiz, 2 quiz, 1 assessment, 1 project, and so on. That is always how we stick to that particular template, without really actually having a thoughts like for example, can I just reduce my assessment, for example, and I just want to make sure that my assessment is on the learning outcomes that I want to test them, right? I think that is one of the challenge that perhaps we could ask ourselves, whether can just the students, if let's say we have 3 learning outcomes for our courses, for example, can the students being given like can they we assess them like 3 or 4 times, for example, just to make sure that they fulfill the learning outcomes. And when, for example, when we are actually doing this alternative assessment, we can also challenge ourselves. Does it always has to be us who actually the one to assess them, to in order for, can the students make self-assessment of what they are doing? So these are the things that we can question and we can ask, right? So perhaps if let's say, and I do agree, for example, if let's say we have bigger number of students, definitely it's going to be very challenging if let's say most of the time we are doing it as, you know, we are going to grade them individually, accordingly. But just recall at the point where actually we are doing, we are working, for example, when we are working right now. It's not all the time that, yes, towards the end of the year, we are having like performance individual appraisal, okay? But that's only once at the end of the year. Along the way, we are actually being tasked to work as a team. We are being tasked to work together, individually, most of the time as a team. And we given certain kind of problems for us to solve. And if you ask ourselves how we will assess during that particular time, if you want to really replicate of what we are doing online, what we are doing as working to the students' life, so can we try to replicate back what we have gone through in our day-to-day job to what they are experiencing? So this is what we want to empower our students. I think in the first place is so that they be able to self-assess themselves, so that they know that whether they are doing it right thing or not. Okay, and I feel that that is some conventional challenge that we have to do to ourselves lah. Of course, when we're coming to talk about hybrid teaching, there's also something new. So we also need to think about the alternative assessment, that also something that is not stick to the past. So that is a challenge that we have to think of. I was asked by an engineering lecturer before, how do I make my exams difficult or unique, because students can easily get question and answer scheme from the internet, especially for courses like thermodynamics and the like. This is a difficult question to answer. Perhaps I can get a view from you as engineering lecturer. Okay, the thing is, this is what actually happened when we always used to take the question from the textbook. From the textbook, and then we want the students, of course all the students will get similar answer, and this is a very close-ended style, which I feel it is also not suitable when you work as an engineer. Imagine that you are working as an engineer later, okay? You have to, if let's say you have a problem, do you open only a textbook, or do you close the textbook in order for you to answer that assessment, that problem, to solve that problem? No, you have to open the textbook. And is it only one textbook? No, it may be a different textbook from different courses that you have to join the information together. Do you do it alone? No, you have to solve it as a team, right? So this is how we want to replicate those things in our students' life. If let's say I am as engineer, I'm as an academician, and I want to produce a future engineer, I want my student to get as close as possible to what their real life as engineer would be. and even to the extent of the assessment. But I know this is still something that need to be challenged. This is, it's not about challenge. I mean, like the perception of most of the engineering educators are still stick to, we have to do a final exam, we have to do the close-ended exam, so that and then when it comes to online learning, I still need to give like this, because otherwise the students cannot be able to answer this. But there are, of course, many ways to do that. One of it is actually one of the approach that I still use until now is what I call as flip assessment, Dr. Rose. Flip assessment ni, I ask my students actually to come up with, instead of they answer my question, I ask them to develop their own question. Develop their own question with full solution, and that has to be submitted through Turnitin, so that I know whether they are copying something else or they is originally come from them. And I also teach them the taxonomy, so that they know what's the level of Bloom taxonomy they should use in order for them to develop the question. What happened to them, the process is actually, whenever that they're going to come up with that kind of assessment, they need, it is similar like us. Whenever that we want to come up with question for exam for the students, we need to go through the textbook, right? We need to scan through, I need to understand, find what would be the suitable question that we could ask. So why don't we replicate similar activity to the students, so that the students will be mastery in the topic, because they need to read through the chapter. They will need to pick, if let's say they're deciding to ask or assess on certain part of the question, they need to really, for example, like they need to do it on their own first, right? They need to really do the solution one by one, check the solution whether it is right, and do it again, reiterate again. That makes them mastery of that particular topic. So why I call it as flip assessment is not similar as flip classroom. It's just that the role changing from the students, they become a lecturer. So that's why I call it as flip assessment. Thank you, Dr. Rose.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Tazli. And for your information, in our session today, we also, apart from we have university lecturers, we also have some participants from schools. Ada daripada RMC, Maktab Tentera Diraja, ada daripada sekolah, and ada juga daripada College Matrikulasi. So I think I would like to ask you, how would the hybrid teaching be different kalau nak apply kepada sekolah lah? So what's your opinion on this?
I think kalau dekat sekolah, the first thing that they need to do is to allow the gadgets to be brought into the class. That's one thing lah. Kalau contohnya is a boarding school, students need to be allowed to be given opportunity for the gadget time lah. And then the design of activities could also, it is not that different compared to the university experience, except the students need to be really exposed to be using the technology, not only in class but also out of class. During the weekend, for example, they have access to that. That should be fine. Similarly, if you're doing at school, normal school, that is also, if let's say you can be able to give some kind of task so that the students can continue to do it during over the weekend or in the evening, or perhaps, for example, like you have a time that you can stop the, a free time for them, like a time for them to really do a self or individual learning during the class. That is also something that can be considered too. Okay, Dr. Ashton?
Okay, I think we don't
I
have
have
any more questions.
I would require my participants to write some kind of reflection. So let me share back the Mentimeter. Okay, so if you can put it on. So I would have wished that those who are actually attending this training, this webinar talk, can you actually just write down some kind of reflection for today's session? Okay. Okay. At the same time, I also can be reached here. So if you are actually subscribing to my YouTube channel, there's also my YouTube channel, my Facebook, LinkedIn. This is my email. If let's say you have anything to ask, so you can reach my website. If you want to get some kind of tips or information over there as well. So over to you, Dr. Rashdan.
Okay, thank you very much. On behalf of Perintis Persatuan Saintis Muslim Malaysia and Young Professionals, Perintis Young Professional Chapter, I would like to thank Dr. Tazli for having his time with us for today, sharing valuable tips on teaching and learning. I think most of us benefited a lot, especially on the different techniques and approaches that we can use. And for all of you that need more information about Perintis, you can go to the Perintis website www.perintis.org.my, or also you can scroll or you can browse our Facebook page, which is Perintis. And I have actually received a lot of recommendations for future topics about teaching and learning, and maybe we can invite Dr. Tazli once again on some of the topics I will share with him later after this. Okay, and thank you everyone again for staying with us until 11:30, and hope to see you in our future program. All right, thank you, and assalamualaikum warahmatullahi
Thank you.
wabarakatuh. See you everyone.
Waalaikumsalam.